The murmurs from the townsfolk lingered in the air like dust stirred by hooves, some whispering pity for the cowboy who'd been sent the wrong bride, others smirking with amusement at the fine lady who clearly didn't belong in the land of rattlesnakes and longhorns. Elena heard it all, every word prickling her skin. But she tightened her grip on Jacob's rough hand, refusing to let the world see her tremble. The stagecoach driver tipped his hat and muttered a quick, "Good luck," then climbed back aboard, leaving her with nothing but a battered trunk, the stares of strangers, and the cowboy who looked at her as if she were both a mistake and a mystery. Jacob didn't waste time with pleasantries. He lifted her trunk as though it weighed no more than a sack of grain, tossed it into the back of his wagon, and gestured for her to climb up. "It's a long ride," he said simply, his voice low and firm, more command than invitation. Elena hesitated, smoothing her travel-worn dress, then climbed onto the wooden seat beside him, spine straight as if she were still in the drawing rooms of her city home. The wagon lurched forward, the horses snorting as they pulled toward the open plains, the town shrinking behind them until only the wide sky and rolling fields remained. For miles they rode in silence, the rhythm of the wheels and the cry of distant hawks the only sound, until at last Elena spoke, her voice steady but soft. "I know I'm not who you expected." Jacob's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the horizon. "No," he admitted, "you ain't." She looked down at her hands, hands that had never worked a day beyond embroidery hoops and piano keys, and wondered how they would fare against dust and rope and cattle. But then she lifted her chin again, that stubborn spark flickering in her emerald eyes. "But I'm here," she said firmly, "and I won't be sent back." Jacob turned his head then, studying her with the measured gaze of a man who had spent years judging whether a horse was worth breaking or whether a storm was worth braving. And though his expression gave nothing away, deep inside he felt something shift. The sun began to sink lower, shadows stretching long across the prairie as the wagon climbed the last rise. And there it was, his ranch. A sprawling sea of golden fields, a weathered barn leaning against the horizon, cattle grazing in the distance, and a modest house standing proud despite the wear of wind and years. Elena's breath caught, not because it was beautiful in any way she had known, but because it was wild, vast, untamed, and it would demand everything from her if she dared to stay. Jacob pulled the reins, the horses slowing as they neared the house, and for the first time since stepping off the stagecoach, she felt a pang of fear, not of him, not of the work, but of the unknown life stretching ahead, one that would either make her stronger or break her completely. As Jacob hopped down and offered his hand once more, she hesitated only a second before placing hers in his. He helped her down, steady and sure, and though his words had been gruff, though his heart was guarded, in that simple gesture lay the promise of a choice neither of them had made but both of them would now have to honor. The cowboy had not ordered her, but fate had delivered her, and the first chapter of their unlikely story was just beginning to unfold beneath the endless Texas sky. The days bled into weeks, and the rhythm of the ranch became a teacher harsher than any Governess Elena had ever known, yet more honest than the polished smiles of her city life. And though her hands bore blisters and her back ached each night, she carried herself with the stubborn grace of a woman who refused to yield to the land, or the man who doubted her. Jacob, for all his gruffness, could not help but notice the way she rose before dawn without complaint, the way she bit her lip until it bled rather than cry out when a wild colt jerked the rope from her hands, the way she stared down storms with her chin lifted, as if daring the thunder to strike her, and slowly, without intending it, he found himself watching her not with skepticism, but with a reluctant admiration he could not easily hide, though he tried, burying himself in work, in silence, in the walls he had built to keep his heart from ever being broken again. One evening, after a long day mending fences, Jacob returned to find Elena on the porch, her dress dust-stained, her hair loose from its pins, kneading dough with a fierceness that made her look more like a queen commanding an army than a bride struggling to learn. When she looked up and saw him, her eyes met his with that same spark from the day they met, and for a moment he forgot the words he meant to say, forgot even to breathe. Caught off guard by the way this woman he never ordered, never expected, was slowly stitching herself into the fabric of his world. Later that night, as they sat by the fire in the small kitchen, their supper simple but warm, Eleanor broke the silence, her voice soft but unshaken. "I know you didn't choose me, Jacob, but I chose to stay, and that has to mean something." Her words struck deeper than any branding iron, and for the first time in years, Jacob felt the walls around his heart crack just enough for light to seep through. He set down his fork, leaned back in his chair, and let his gaze linger on her, not as a stranger, not as an unwanted burden, but as a woman who had stood her ground where others would have fled. "I told you once you weren't what I ordered," he said slowly, the firelight flickering across his weathered face. "But maybe I was a fool to think a man can order what he needs." And the way she smiled then, weary yet radiant, made something shift so permanent in him that he knew, deep in the marrow of his bones, that this was no mistake but providence. The nights that followed grew softer, the silence between them filling with unspoken understanding, with the brush of hands as they passed a cup, with laughter breaking loose like rain after a drought, when a calf escaped the pen and they chased it, together under the moonlight, stumbling breathless into each other's arms. By the time the first blossoms of spring dotted the fields, the cowboy who had once sworn he would live alone with his cattle found himself waking each morning not to the call of the rooster, but to the quiet strength of the woman beside him, and the town that had once whispered of their unlikely match now spoke of them with a respect that could not be denied. And so the man who thought he wanted obedience found devotion, and the woman who thought she was too delicate for the frontier became its fiercest heart. And together, hand in hand, they began a life not written by order forms or contracts, but by love born of grit, trial, and a faith in each other that nothing, not drought, not storm, not time could undo.